Call to order the Brattleboro Housing Partnerships regular meeting at 4:34. And is there any resident citizen participation and questions?
Well, we have some residents here, so I don't know, we might want to open it up now, and then we could also hold, if there are things that we talk about throughout the meeting, we can also hold questions and comments to the end as well. But if there's anything to start with?
Is there anything that you brought?
I just don't know what a commissioner is.
Great.
So just pretend I never came here before.
Okay. So this is a full board, and we are as part of the municipality. So we were all voted in from the select board, and we help guide and support Brattleboro Housing Partnerships as a board.
Thank you.
Yep. Great. Any other questions or comments from resident or community participation?
At the moment.
Okay. So we'd like to review the minutes from July 22nd meeting, and I would need a motion to accept the minutes.
I motion that we accept July 22nd, 2024's meeting minutes.
And second?
I second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. The next on the agenda is board business. So the first thing that we would like to discuss is the new policy in draft form of the 2024 weapon policy. So any comments or questions from the board? We have Jeanette here to answer any questions as well in support. So any questions about the weapons policy information for board discussion?
I'd just like to say I appreciate the policy. I think it's really well written, very thorough. I appreciated the background information that you provided to help sort of understand what is the current state of what are the laws in Vermont, for example, around this. I thought it seemed very thoughtful. I was curious about whether offices needed to be called out more specifically in the policy, or whether we were happy with the way that it's written in the first couple paragraphs. But overall, I'm in favor of the way it's written.
Okay, yeah. You can ask a question.
Where would we find a copy of it to be familiar with it, please?
Yes.
So I don't have, I'm sorry, I don't have copies of it
I
with
have
us.
a couple copies.
Oh, Jeanette has some, yeah.
I have
Thank you.
2 extra ones, I think.
I can read I can read it aloud if that's helpful to people.
Sure.
Thank you.
So the current policy is the discharge of guns is prohibited on Brattleboro Housing Partnership properties. Any weapon must be stored in a manner that is safe and keeps the weapons away from children. All state and local laws regulating the storage of weapons are applicable, and the use of any weapon in a manner that would be considered a threat or has the potential of hurting people, animals, or property is prohibited. Violations of this policy will be considered a lease violation with appropriate action resulting. So that's our current policy, yes.
I didn't know weapons were allowed on the grounds.
Okay,
That's fact then, apparently, that they are allowed in the building?
yeah,
By
under
residents?
Vermont law, we have to allow people to have, so there's more information at the end of the policy, but there are specific laws that where people live, they are allowed to have, weapons, but they're not allowed to threaten someone with it, brandish it. They're not allowed to, say, I don't like what you're saying here. Look what I got. You're not allowed to do this. But it isn't. But we live in a state that is an open carry law. So we, as Brattleboro Housing Partnerships, don't have the ability
It's a law.
under the law to say that people can't have a weapon where they live. Okay?
Didn't know that.
Sorry.
Yep,
I
and,
didn't mean to interrupt.
no, Jeanette,
I was just gonna say, it isn't a law that people have to be allowed to
Oh,
carry.
sorry,
There is
guys.
just no law that prohibits people from carrying either open or concealed. So people are allowed to carry either open or concealed anywhere in the state of Vermont.
And that's the Second Amendment, right?
Well, that's
Some
a,
states aren't as open as Vermont.
Yes,
Right.
yes, Vermont.
but Vermont does have, and the only place that are prohibited are schools, courthouses, and hospitals.
Makes sense.
so we're drafting a policy right now, a proposed policy that we did research, thanks to Jeanette. So Jeanette and I have been working on this for some time, to draft language that is clear, precise, and that also is as close to as strict under what we're allowed to do. And so that's why we reframed the policy. So I read what our policy was, which was 2 very short paragraphs, and then the new policy is pretty detailed. Did you want me to read the new policy? Or the proposed new
Is
policy?
that on that, is that on that paper?
It is.
It is on the
It
paper.
is? Okay, thank you.
Will everybody get a copy of this once it's been
Approved.
approved?
Yeah, so our policies are in the handbook, so we'll update the information in your handbook, and then it'll be in your tenant handbook, like all the other policies that we have. Yep,
I keep everything that you guys send me.
yeah,
so.
yeah.
That's a good thing.
I do.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting discussion because most people don't, they're not aware of, they're not even aware that there is a policy or that there was a policy or that we want to propose a new policy or what the limitations are. Most people in our housing have they're not aware of this. So this was brought to us a few months ago at a different housing site, and we looked at it, and that's why we did this research. And then, we wanted to bring it to the board to say whether or not they wanted to review this, if they want to change the language, have us look into further information, or if they like this, then they would vote to decide whether or not they wanted to approve it as part of the policy. So anytime we have a policy change that affects all residents, we have to bring it to, that is one of the regulatory, that's their job as regulators of ours, is to approve any policy changes that directly affect residents. So that could be lease changes, our admin plan, or rules. I'm just saying this because it's nice to have residents engaged. So it's a good time to talk about this.
May I speak?
Yes.
And it says as display, what that mean? Display, what do you mean? Walking around with a gun?
I just gave all my copies away.
Here,
that's okay.
You can have mine, I can share. if that's
Okay, sure.
I don't understand that.
Where are you?
Showing it and threatening people.
Yeah, I understand that. I don't know that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Is that displaying, is that what
Yes,
you're looking at?
display, I was trying to understand that.
They're prohibited from, if you look at the whole sentence, it says prohibited from displaying, brandishing, discharging, or
Yes.
otherwise using in any manner that intimidates, harasses, or in any way
Right,
endangers.
I-
So,
I got
you can display it,
And
but if you
you're-
display it by saying, hey, look at that, you better be quiet,
Yeah,
that's
that's,
harassing
yes, it
or
is.
intimidating.
Like the way you have it, you can display them in your home.
In my home.
But you can carry it
and I'm
on your-
allowed to walk with them.
Yes, you are.
Carry it too.
Yes, you are allowed to walk around with
But I would never harm nobody.
No. People's faces.
So I think I love having this discussion, but we gotta really, because we have to follow
Yes,
certain
okay, keep
protocols.
going.
We gotta follow certain protocols around, so we're gonna let the board talk, and then if people have any questions after,
Yep.
we'll open it up,
We'll
okay?
open it At the end, okay. So, any other comments or,
So Michelle had a question, if the board wanted stricter language around saying that no weapons are allowed in the offices. I think our plan was to have signage on the offices stating it on the offices, but I think that's where we kind of came to an understanding, because we thought that would be, because we
Yeah.
have to put a sign up if we don't allow it at a certain place. But there's really no places other than our offices where we could prohibit people from having it, because every other place is a common space that people have rights on the common spaces of their community.
The other question that I had was, the current policy
Mhm.
states per people and animals, and the second one does not, specify animals at all. So I was just curious about that.
You're right, it doesn't, we could add it in there.
Yeah, if the board wants to, I just noticed that difference.
Where would that be added in?
That was the third paragraph.
That was the third.
Be down here at the end.
Any other comments or questions?
Well, I was wondering too, also, does it specify like in playgrounds where kids are at on some of the sites and also in community rooms maybe? Maybe we can specify,
Yeah, we can't prohibit in the common areas where
like the
people.
playgrounds, we can.
Yep.
Okay,
Again, people would have to have a legal right to carry a firearm, so a
Wherever
child,
they live.
can't have a firearm because they're not an adult. But a parent who might wanna go watch their children might not feel safe without having, they have the right to carry it on a common area. I know it seems very,
yeah,
I think that's a complicated question, but that is, when we looked into the law, we couldn't, we wouldn't have a way of prohibiting it at those places.
If I can just say that everybody I talked to in researching this to see what we could do said, this is a really sticky situation.
yeah.
That was their bottom line comment.
And I think the hardest part would be also just enforcement, right? So like, it wouldn't be an enforceable thing. Which I hesitant to have any policy that we can't directly enforce.
And the reason, courthouses, hospitals, and schools had to have special legislation enacted to prohibit guns at those three places. So if you wanted to prohibit it at a playground, you would have to go to the legislature and have them specifically put that into legislation.
And it's not just a playground, it's a playground where people live, so it's like
Right.
considered their home.
Yeah.
Right.
Your military clubs, your VFW and American Legion, they've got signs prohibiting.
Right, but that's not where people live, so people have the right to go. I think that
But Pat, the private places can prohibit weapons under the no trespass law. So what you do is if somebody, say you're a store downtown and you don't want to allow weapons in your store, you have a no trespass with weapons. So somebody comes in and you say, I'm sorry, but you can't come in with that weapon. And then if they insist, then you get a no trespass order against them. So it's very, like the State House has a sign that says no weapons in the State House. It's unenforceable. There's a sign and it says no weapons, but there's no way of enforcing it. The same at the sheriff's office. He has a common area there that isn't there. It's just the public space. He has a sign that says no weapons and he can't enforce it in that area. So, yeah.
So we could put signage up, however, we could put signage up on the playgrounds, but we wouldn't be able to enforce it.
Right. I mean, just that notice is known as.
So I hesitant, I think that's really up to the board, what they feel would be helpful, but if somebody, came and argued with me about it, I feel like that's opening up a can of worms that we don't need to open up because it isn't an issue, and if it's not enforceable, I would hate to create an issue that we don't have for something that I can't enforce. But I will leave that up to the board. I mean, we definitely could put signages up. I think that we want to do it at the offices because that is in a common area. Those are private spaces, so we can do that in the offices. But because of the playgrounds are common areas, I think that that's something that the board should.
And that
Should
would
think about.
include the offices at each site,
Mm-hmm.
the stash offices.
Another thing, if a resident does obtain a weapon, do they have to notify housing that they have it?
No.
They don't.
Especially if it's a certain type of assault
Assault.
weapon though, like it discharges more than
Yeah,
a certain
automatic.
amount. Yeah.
No?
Yeah, automatic.
It's a legal weapon in the state of Vermont, it's a legal weapon.
I'm gonna refer to Jeanette for this one.
You, it's illegal to have a magazine over 10 capacity. So if they had that, that's against the state law.
So this proposed policy offers a lot of information and education around state law as well. What would you say would be the biggest differences other than that from the proposed policy to the current policy?
Well, I don't think you want to put all of this in your policy. I think that the background was just for your
For us,
information. I
okay.
don't think you want, I think the biggest thing is the third paragraph. And the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, that little tiny paragraph there, that actually, and the way the other housing authority had it is for law enforcement, people who are in their official capacity, and we changed that to professionals who are authorized to carry weapons, because there's a possibility that probation officers might be authorized to carry a weapon, and so if they're authorized in their professional capacity and they're on the grounds in their professional capacity, then they would,
So,
but that's, I think that's the biggest change.
so I'm guessing, I
And being
guess,
more specific.
what Christine was saying, something that's not enforceable, is that in our purview? And does that language have to be changed if we can't enforce a certain issue, we can't, what do we, I mean, what is it that we can, that is enforceable, what isn't, I guess, kind of get that clear cut.
So everything in the draft policy would be enforceable, like everything in
Okay.
this policy
Right,
would be, it aligns with the law, so
Okay.
that we could enforce if somebody broke any of these things. This is what is enforceable. What I was saying is that we could put a signage, I mean, I wouldn't say to put it in the policy, but we could put signs up on the playground or certain areas saying no weapons allowed. It's just that if somebody came to me and said, well, I want to carry a weapon there when I watch my kids play, I don't feel safe, I couldn't prevent them from doing so, unfortunately.
right, and you're right, unless it states, like you said, if you go to a court, it has the section and the number where to get that information from in the law. It wouldn't be on that plaque or anything, we put it up in the playground, because a lot of times when you go to the court, it tells you under this law, under this penal code or whatever, firearms are prohibited or not. But if we put one up, there's no law that says you can't, so it's not enforceable, it's suggested. We would like to keep the place up. I think that language in there stating that, for safety of the children and the people in the tenants, we asked not to bring any, like alcohol beverages or whatever, something like that. And like you said, if it's not enforceable, totally understood, but we probably would, if that is an infraction, sit down with the individual and just explain to them, this is why this is here, for your safety, for anyone else's here.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a difference, just, and maybe you want to speak to this, like the difference between like a public park and where in a park
Right.
in a
Like
and
Memorial, right?
like what the difference would be potentially, like where people live,
Yeah.
like where they actually, so they live at our property
Gather,
sites, that's
yeah.
their home.
Right.
Like that's different than when you're in the community, right? So
Yeah, it's just, it's common areas where people live, and I think that if you could try putting up a sign, but it is unenforceable. You could say, for the safety of everybody, we encourage you
Right.
not to bring your weapons here. I'm not sure that if somebody wanted to carry, they
Right.
would, they wouldn't pay any attention to the sign.
Right, I
So,
mean, there's signs everywhere.
I'm
for
not
everything.
sure that would do any good. And and people don't have to be permitted or licensed or register guns or anything in Vermont, so.
Right,
You don't have to be registered?
No.
Wow.
Mental
No.
illness and.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I am registered, but I didn't know that.
so there's a lot of information.
Felonies, you know.
So if you've been convicted of a felony, I believe that is, you're a prohibited, there are certain people who are prohibited from carrying
Right.
guns, so there are laws around that. But I think just to get back to, like, there are the laws of the state, right, that we have no control over, that we can't change as a group.
right.
But, and then there are the policies that we can draft to keep
To
people
the
as safe
extent
as possible, but they still have to adhere to the law. Do you know what I'm saying? So like, I can't change that. I could bring that to our, you could bring that to the legislators and you could say, this is a concern of mine, I would like, could you please work on this? And we could do that as a board, but really I can't change that, but I can only create policies based on what the legal laws are. Yeah. So I hear what you're saying. Everything you're saying is valid, but it's not, but we don't have the ability to make that determination. Yeah.
And I think the last paragraph tells you that you're not trying to override any law or anything else. And people, if they have guns, they have to be legally acceptable. They have to be within the law to have that gun. So some people can't have guns. And
It does seem that this policy takes us right up to what we're allowed to.
Yep.
What we're allowed to do.
That was-
There is nothing that the law, there's nothing more we could say in order to protect residents and still follow the law to respect everyone's rights.
So the proposed policy as currently written in draft form, are there any changes being proposed before we put in motion?
Well, it sounded like you wanted to add animals.
Yeah.
So I think that sounds like a good change. So that would be in the third paragraph at the end, harasses or in any way endangers or harms any other persons or animals at the property. No. Any other persons at the property, including staff and agents of BHP, and where do you want to put
I would
animals?
put it in any other persons or animals at the property.
Okay.
So
I had a
Okay,
question about
great.
the bullying in paragraph 4. I wondered if that was enforceable. If making threats, engaging in active violence, or bullying, especially if a dangerous weapon is involved, will not be tolerated and is in clear violation of the policy.
That's already state law.
The word bullying in
That's what the sheriff looked at this.
Yeah.
And he said that bullying with a weapon involved
Okay.
is already a state.
Okay.
That's threatening.
That's like.
Right. That's threatening people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I hear what your
I'm
point
easy
is,
with that
though.
then,
It's
yeah.
hard to, it's hard to differentiate between, it's hard for us as staff to differentiate between bullying, threat, all
Right,
of those
right. I think
pieces.
there's
However, I
legal-
think it's good to put the language in, like if we find that somebody, if somebody accuses someone of bullying and there's a weapon involved, and let's say there's a court case or, there's an arrest, then we have that in our policy, that adheres to our policy as well, and that we could then take action against them. But I hear what you're saying, it's hard to differentiate between bullying and other forms of harassment.
Any other changes proposed?
So let's see, federal, state laws, and local laws too, I guess? Are there laws locally that prohibit anything
It's
in the
just-
town, or?
Towns aren't allowed to have separate weapons policies
Okay.
other than,
Just one thing.
Okay, so, do we want to make a potential motion with the proposed changes that were discussed today?
I move we accept the weapons policy as corrected.
Do I have a second?
I second.
I'm sorry,
Okay,
I have another question,
okay,
and
thank you.
I wondered if in the first paragraph around the offices piece, did we want to say something like, to ensure that Brattleboro Housing Partnerships maintains residents and offices that are safe and free of violence? I'm still not really seeing I know we're going to put up signs, and I think that that's appropriate. Is there?
Do you think that we could add language specifically to the policy that specifically says offices? The weapons won't be allowed in office, you
probably could.
so we could add that to the policy.
I would appreciate that. I think that offices may be in separate places than residences, and in this town particularly, at folks' places of work, there has been violence, and so specifically, not, forgetting that space.
Okay, so that would be in the first paragraph?
Maintains residences and offices.
And then adding a line that says
And then I think.
weapons will be prohibited from all
Staff
BHP office spaces.
Or at this point, because some offices are further back, so this coming on the premises alone, that'll be posted.
Sorry, could you say that again?
Oh, at certain points to, and access to going into the other offices in the back, so at this point, there'll be no weapons brought past that point as well also.
It would be on the physical office
Yeah,
themselves, yeah.
But if we wanted to add language to the policy, we could add a line that says, that the weapons won't be allowed in office spaces.
I think that would be somewhere in the third paragraph. I mean, it does say, so in entirety, the third paragraph, all residents, staff, and guests are prohibited from displaying, brandishing, discharging, or otherwise using any and all dangerous weapons, including firearms, in any manner that intimidates, harasses, or in any way endangers or harms any other persons or animals at the property.
Including staff and agents of BHP, right?
Right,
right.
And then it would be a full line, I think, that said,
okay.
weapons will be prohibited from all BHP offices.
But again, that's not actually enforceable by law, right?
It is actually enforceable in the offices, because that's not where people live. That's not a common area.
Right.
Okay, gotcha, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, to keep staff safe.
Yeah, and also other resident, if somebody else was in there, but, yeah.
Yeah, I get it, thank you.
Okay, I think I'm happy with that.
Okay, so I'm going to propose that we make a motion to accept the current draft policy and the proposed changes.
So I motion that we accept those changes, amend the amendment, and, yeah.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thanks, Janelle.
Will rewrite
Thank you.
this.
Yeah.
And I apologize, I have another meeting at
Okay.
5:30.
Okay, thank you.
And then we're gonna just talk a little bit about the, sorry, you go ahead, Felicia.
Okay, So the next on our agenda is the,
Thank you, Jeanette.
thank you, Jeanette, is the Brattleboro Housing Partnerships Moving to Work Supplemental Plan. Do we have any questions or comments?
So this is the proposed plan. I'm just putting this out there that this is just the draft. We're not voting on this. This isn't, we're doing public hearings with residents. So the residents will have notice that there's gonna be public hearings during our October meeting. So these changes, but we have presented some of these changes to the RAC board just to tell them what they are. And then also, I just wanted you all to have a heads up before we meet for the public hearing in October, just to have an opportunity to look at it. So I'm trying to
Questions from the board or comments?
So one of the proposals is around medical deductions. It's on the second page, second page, medical deductions. And so this will be something that will directly impact residents. And so we have made a couple of changes around how we accept medical deductions. What we've decided to do is HUD is changing the mandatory. So right now, if you have to have 3% of your adjusted gross income paid in medical bills before you can get a deduction. And the deduction comes directly to your adjusted gross income. It's not like a straight deduction to your rent, right? So HUD is actually raising that to 10%. That we can't change. That's going to be a new rule. So you can't take a deduction unless it's 10% of your adjusted gross income.
So can I just say that? So I spend a certain amount of money on my medical. If I spend a lot of money, let's say 3%, then I can, at this point, I can take that off of my income that I report to HUD, which will affect my rent. And HUD is now saying actually 3% isn't enough. You need to be paying 10% instead. You need to be paying more for your medical needs before you can start to claim that as a reduction of your income. Okay.
So the new policy would allow, I'm trying to read this and also talk about it at the same time. So allow certain expenses for all qualified households without having to meet the threshold. So we are applying for a waiver to HUD as a moving to work agency to say that all households will be able to qualify, that they don't have to meet the threshold of 10%, because a lot of people won't meet the threshold of 10%. But then we're going to change what they can actually use as deductions. So we're going to limit it a little bit. So instead of keeping the 10%, which means a lot of people won't even qualify at all, we're going to apply for a waiver that says that we're going to allow everybody to meet who is either a senior or adults with disability to get a basic automatic deduction. Everybody gets one. However, if they get beyond a certain point, then we'll only count certain things. Like we'll count things like paid health insurance, like if you have to pay a premium for your supplemental insurance, specific bills to your doctor if you have medical payments, but we're not going to be taking receipts for every single over-the-counter medication that you have, because we find that those things, it's a huge administrative burden, and it really only applies to a very small amount of people. And so we felt like it would be better to have it be that everybody gets a deduction, but yet we can't do all of these things, we can't do all of these things still. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense.
Okay. And we're gonna flesh it out a little bit more in the public hearing, but that is the overall. So you can read through this, and then if you have any other questions, let me know. But I wanted to give you the kind of basics of it, is that HUD is already, through HOTMA, is saying we want it to be the 10%. And we were saying, well, we want to apply for a waiver, and we want to lower it, but we want to allow everybody to get a deduction, but we're not going to take everything. So the things that wouldn't be allowed that are gym memberships, massages, exercise gear, and other recommendations by a medical provider. Not allowed are food or nutritional maintenance products, even if it's recommended by a doctor. And not allowed are over-the-counter medications, even if it's recommended by a doctor. And there are people who use those for sure, but they don't. We don't have a lot of people, but they are a big administrative burden to try to figure out and make sure that they qualify, and like I think someone once had a bathing suit. Well, that does that qualify under the HUD rule? Even though your doctor says you have to swim, what is this? Where does it really fall in? And so I think by streamlining the policy, then we said, okay, well, we would allow more people. Everybody would get a deduction, and then anything above that, they would still get to use. I think the biggest expenses are really the supplemental insurance. Some people pay out of pocket $300 a month for their supplemental insurance, more than that. So those things would still be counted, but we wouldn't be counting these other things that are a little bit harder. So that's that piece. And there is a hardship for this. So current policy allows for residents to include over-the-counter food supplements and other quality of life expenses for deductions if ordered by licensed medical care professionals. Starting in 2025, the policy change that excludes these expenses, some families may need time to financially adjust. So any participant claiming health care expenses as a deduction as of April 1st, 2025, may request a hardship one-time relief. So they'll get a chance, another time to recertify. And we only recertify every 3 years. So it buys people a lot of time. So that's that piece. And then the other thing was, right now we have third-party housing quality standards inspections. So we have Springfield Housing Authority comes down once a year to do them. And we were going to apply, we inspect all of our units ourselves biannually at some properties, at least annually at most properties, at all properties. But we need to do a housing quality standards inspection every year annually by an outside person, and it's only 20% of the apartments in our RAD properties. We have a partnership with Springfield Housing to do theirs, and they do ours. But we were going to apply so that we could do it in-house, because the housing quality standards they're going to get much stricter, and so we'll be able to do them in-house ourselves because we'll have to certify them. So we're applying for that. And then the other piece was a child support deduction. Right now, people who pay child support to someone, that is not a deduction off of their gross income. And so if people can prove that they have been paying child support, not that they've been told by the court they have to pay, but they actually are paying the child support, then we can deduct it from their income. And that was from a direct result from residents who pay child support and said, I'm paying child support, but you're still counting it as income, and I don't have that money. And so we went back and forth. So that would be another change that we could apply for. So those are the 3 changes.
Great. Any other questions or comments from the board?
I guess, how often do you go back, sort of like a lot of times, just to reevaluate? Is it every 6 months, or what do you go back to just to reevaluate if the person has any changes?
Well, we only certify it. So we went to every 3 years to certify.
Okay.
Yep. So people would look at the last. It's a good question, Gary. How far back we look. I'd have to. I don't know that off the top of my head. I can find out. When we do the recertification, I want to say it's 3 months.
Yeah.
But it could be the whole year.
I don't know, 6 months. I'm trying to remember it. Yeah, I had a calculation, but every so often they do a revalue on that, and I just didn't know. Sort of like with housing or anything else, like economic services, they do a reval to see where you're at, to see financially if there's any changes or anything, any added additions or anything like that.
After our old policy, under our old policy, you had to tell us within a certain amount of time because your rent would be adjusted.
Right.
And that's still the same policy at other housing authorities or Vermont State Housing.
Right, that makes a difference.
But we
yeah,
ask people to tell us because we're tracking it, because we're trying to see if people's incomes go up, but we aren't we're not recertifying people's rent. We'll only do it under a hardship if people's income go down by a certain amount, then we'll recertify. But if it goes up, it doesn't, we don't recertify at this point until every 3 years, yep.
That's until 2026, right? Everybody's rent's gonna stay the same?
Yeah, it depends on the housing site because they're all on a
Yeah.
different schedule,
Okay,
but
it is.
it could be that, I don't have it off the top of my head which one Simile it is, but yeah, when we started the new policy.
2026 on ours.
Yep, then you're probably right.
Thank you.
All right, are we ready to move on? Yep, okay.
Yeah, you're right.
So the next on our agenda is the employee celebration. So we had a subcommittee who got together and is proposing a breakfast for the staff from the board. And they would like to propose it for October 11th. And at 8:30 in the morning, it would be a breakfast, and it would be pastries or bagels, as along with some presentations.
That's a Monday.
It's a Friday.
It's a Friday.
Before the holiday weekend.
Okay. Are you checking the date?
Yes, it's October 11th, this is a Friday before the Indigenous Peoples' Day
Oh,
weekend.
nice.
Any other comments from the subcommittee or questions?
We had three things we could do down here.
Mhm.
But when we had retreat and had that, the pastry from the Vermont Country Deli seemed to really go off.
Yeah, I had a few other places I marketed, looked into New England, what was the one, the steakhouse, I was looking at
New
that.
England House.
There's another one I didn't know that opened up too, there's an Echo that just opened up on Putney Road. I wasn't aware, so there's a couple, matter of fact, it just opened, well, I don't know if that's a restaurant on Elliott, is that a restaurant that also?
It's a bar lounge, yes, it's also a restaurant.
All right, and like you said, if you're doing just catering, then that would be a good choice. And at the same token too, they can have like a 5-minute presentation of, speaking on their behalf, and then, maybe a plaque or something, or cards we can also present to them.
Okay, so what are you proposing? Are we doing a gift as well?
Yeah, I would definitely suggest if that's within, reason.
Okay, so we still have some time to be able to do
Right.
some research on that.
Okay.
So we can, make another proposal for the gift.
Yeah,
And
I think that'd be
then,
great, that'd be perfect.
Bring it
And then, yeah,
again to
that's-
the,
We won't have time before the
not
next
to
meeting.
the next
Yeah.
meeting, but at least to the chair and,
Yeah.
Christine,
Absolutely.
okay?
Absolutely.
Does that work?
Okay, sounds great.
Okay.
Cool. Yep.
So we don't need a proposed motion for that or anything.
Nope. So it sounds like no matter what, we're gonna do something
Yeah.
for breakfast of some sort,
Right.
depending on, and to be fair, like, I didn't think of this until right now, but because that's like the busiest weekend of the year in Vermont, like they may not be able to do that at the deli, so like it might be good to think about, I mean, unless you've already talked to them and reserved it, but I do know that they can be very, very busy, because of foliage, so maybe thinking about,
That seemed to be the top choice, but then they have two other
Okay.
options as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you wanted to do catered food, my only suggestion, like, you might be able to call the porch. Sometimes they do, I know that they're not open on Fridays, but they might do small catering,
The
which has
Vermont
been nice.
Country was good, the one that I don't know if that's the one you went to also.
Yeah, it was delicious.
That was delicious.
I didn't think of it. I didn't think of it
Yeah, I was
until we were
like,
just
that
talking about it, and we were
was
thinking about that weekend, but I do know that weekend is very, very busy for them
Yeah.
because it's such a big
And
tourist
it's leaf
weekend.
season, so.
Yeah. But thank you so much for
Thank
putting
you for your
thought
research
into
and your
it. Thank you.
time. Yeah.
I'm
And
sure
it's
they'll really
8:30?
appreciate it. So I will let staff know.
Okay.
I will, if that,
Great. Is 8:30 an okay time?
yeah, I
Okay.
think that sounds
Cool.
great.
And that's the
Great.
11th is Friday. About the, okay, the
Before the big
13th is that heirloom day up in Scott Farm, so probably that doesn't remember that too. So, it's a thought.
Great.
Do a bag of apples.
So the next thing on our agenda was the BHP Board Retreat. Did we want to discuss anything about that? We recently had a Commissioners Board Retreat. We met on a Saturday, and it was added to the agenda to discuss.
Yeah. So I did type up all the notes. I didn't do like a Word thing because I couldn't figure out how to do that yet. I think, but I did type up all the notes, so I have that for the board if the board wants to take those
Great.
items home and review them.
That would be great. Thank you, Christine. So the next on our list is the Executive Director's Report.
So the majority of my report was about an incident that we had at one of our properties in August, which was unfortunately we had a shooting at a property at our A.W. Richards building that was really traumatic for all staff, residents, and community members. I just wanted to give you a report out of what happened afterwards. So the protocol for us at this point is that when there's a serious emergency, a critical emergency situation, that staff will go to the site if it's allowable by the town, meaning the police department or the fire department. So the police department did call us. So myself, Lorelei Morissette, who is the resident services director, and a maintenance person all went to the site specifically to be there in case residents had questions or concerns, but also to be of support to if the police needed anything in that moment. So we did respond right away. We were able to let the police department did do their complete investigation, and then once they were finished, we did secure the unit. Immediately the next day, we began meeting with residents in person. So we had support staff that were at the properties right away, including the nurse and also the mental health clinician that is on staff for Brattleboro Housing Partnerships. And they met with residents throughout the course of that first day, pretty much all day. They were just on site. Also that day, later in the afternoon, after I met, sent information to the board and worked with the police, I also did go down there, and it was great that the police also sent a sergeant and an officer down to talk to residents with myself. And we were really able to answer any questions that residents had about the situation that we could share, but also just about some of the complexities of evicting people that we know are, that potentially are doing harm on the property, and what that process looks like. And so we were able to share that information, and then we continued to go have support staff on the property for a week. So, over the weekend, I stopped in and a couple times to just see if people were around. Then we continued to have support staff on the property, and that seemed to really help. And then since then, we've continued to do some other meetings. Last week we had a police liaison meeting, and we have been talking to residents about what we could do, extra steps to feel safer. Another follow-up is I've been in communication with the police department to see if maybe we could have other meetings on other sites, specifically this site, because it's right downtown, and we've had situations before where we've had concerns. I think that we've done a lot of things to try to keep this building safer. We've started to lock that exterior door. We've hired surveillance teams. We've upgraded the cameras. We have, we've been continuing to do other things to try to keep this property safe. We have the bathrooms locked for right now. But I think it would be helpful for the residents in this building to be able to talk to police officers, because there's so much, it's not just at our properties, it's everywhere in town. Everywhere, everyone is feeling a little less safe than they used to. Mm-hmm. And so I think having these conversations in a way that allows residents to feel like their voice is being heard, and that if they have suggestions, we'd like to hear them so that maybe if there's something that we can do, we'd like to change that. And we got a lot of suggestions last year when we had some safety meetings from this site, and we were able to implement those things. I think it's time to do it again. So the police department has said that they would be willing to come. So we're trying to schedule that. I think we're shooting for next week. And so I just sent them some dates that work. And then also at Hayes Court, which is next door to the A.W. Richards building. We want to do another meeting there. We also ordered some magnets that the town had designed. The police department of the town had designed these magnets that have information about when to call the police for 911, also what the tip line is and what the tip email is, so that if people have tips, they can send those in. And so we, BHP, said, well, we'll buy those too. So we paid to have those made, so we'll be able to distribute those to all residents. We had enough ordered that everybody can have one. And so just giving that information so that people are reminded that they should call the police when they see something. It's really important if you see something, that it is important that we all as a community work together, not just in our sites, but throughout the whole community. We're responsible for trying to keep our community safe too. Yeah. So that was the majority of what I talked about. And did you have any questions about that though? I know that was a lot, it was a big mouthful.
I'm curious if one Brattleboro, has that come out of this, or is that, I'm thinking about it sounds like you've done a lot of thinking about what led up to it, and if there was anything anybody could have done, or that, the board or the housing partnerships might have done. And it sounds like understanding when to call, and it sounds like hearing residents' voices are things that, you determined were necessary. And is one Brattleboro one of those things, or are there other things?
Yeah, so One Brattleboro is a group that is being organized right now in Brattleboro. It's one of the parts of the safety plan. And it's about community providers coming together and to share information about, so the police can share public record information so that then social service agencies can work to address that. So Brattleboro Housing Partnerships has been meeting with the police every month for over a year. I think it's been 15 months where we had just asked to start meeting with them, and the chief was really open to that idea, and the assistant chief has been meeting with us every month, where we review all the police reports at all of our properties, and then we talk about what we could do to make things safer, and if there's a situation that we see that we think is a concern, and we start seeing police reports, then we can have this conversation of what should we do next? Right. What I found that a couple of steps that we have been taking is when we identify that there's a problem, that we see that there's a potential problem on a property site, we start hiring a surveillance team, which is very expensive. But I will say that it helps, because what it does is it gives us a lot of information that it's really hard for us to get otherwise. So they can really be on properties, they can kind of assess over the course of a few weeks what's going on. And then we're able to give some of that information if it's within the constraints of confidentiality, but we can, if it's happening in public spaces, then we can share some of that with the police department too, if we think that there's a concern. And then, and so the One Brattleboro, I think, is a great, Brattleboro Housing Partnership has been right on board right from the beginning. I think we will continue. When this in the last select board meeting, I don't know for how many people were attended, but I attended the last select board meeting to talk a little bit about this new ordinance that's happening in town. That also talks a little bit about properties where there's a high utilization of police activity. And so I don't want our residents to think that they can't call the police. I think it's really important that they feel like no matter what, they call the police if there's an issue. So I want to get that message out to residents, regardless of what the cap is. The other thing is I was assured from the town that because we work so closely with the police department on a regular basis, and we're always trying to come up with plans on keeping our property safe, that we wouldn't be fined if we were continuing to do that, which was nice to hear. but I fear that I don't want people to not call the police because they see that. So I really want to get a lot of communication out that we should continue to call the police if there's concerns. I don't want that to be a barrier to people at all. But also, I think it's important that, you know, in speaking with the town manager, I said, well, we really want to be sitting at the table to come up with best practices for landlords when they're having these critical issues, because we have a lot we can learn, but we also have a lot of information we can share. We've been doing this for a long time. We have a lot of knowledge, and so we want to be at the table so that we can be, you know, one of the community leaders who says, this is what works for us and this isn't working. How can we make this better? How can we work better together? So.
And that's
Sorry.
part of the strategy, right? That, from that last member of the select board, yeah. And that was great that Christine was there at that meeting and, you know, representing BHP and everyone here. It means a lot. And this is gonna be something continually. This is not just a one-time thing. This is gonna be ongoing. It's a work in progress and, you know, it's gonna happen.
So do you want to take a question? I think that's
Do we want to hold, yeah,
Okay.
Is it okay if we hold it till the end?
Of course.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so, any other questions or can we move on? Okay, so we do have, this next agenda item with a potential motion. So the property review and property manager's report with proposed write-offs. Any questions about the property manager's report?
No.
Okay, so the proposed write-offs is for the A&W Richards Building, $1,223.80. The Hayes Court for $348.77, and for Samuel Elliott, $30.38. Do I have a potential motion to approve two write-offs totaling, three write-offs, totaling $1,602.95.
Your motion that we do the two write-offs? Is it two write-offs or three?
Three.
Okay, it says approve two write-offs, okay.
Oh, sorry, that was my mistake.
So we want to amend that, to say to amending that to three write-offs. There's a total of $1,602.95.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. The resident wellness and services report. That's the blue one. Any questions or comments from the board?
Just appreciated the reports. And I did notice that Jess Grover talked about free weights, which are out of the program budget, and I wondered if that might be taken up by Brattleboro Housing Opportunities at some point.
Yeah, I think the hard part is so her program is embedded specifically at the Canal House, which is not a Brattleboro Housing Partnership property.
Right.
So we have asked them to, you know, we can talk to them a little bit about if they would contribute in some way, if it's beyond what we can contribute as a budget. You know, that's something that, like, within our own property site, if we were to see a need and it isn't in the SASH budget, or we can't use the money that way, we would pay for it potentially, but we can't do that for their sites. And I don't even know if they'd want the weights there. So I appreciate you bringing it up, but I'm happy to have a conversation with Jess and see what she thinks. Yeah, they might be willing to do it. Yep.
Any other questions or comments?
Nope, just appreciate the information.
Thank you. Okay. And that includes the resident services newsletter. So the Section 8 Administrator Housing Choice Voucher Program Shelter Plus Care Report, the yellow one. Any questions or comments?
I think it's a great idea to cross-train Estelle. Yeah, that's redundancy is smart.
What this says for July and August is calendars?
Yeah, it was
Yeah, 'cause
because
we
we didn't have a
missed
month, we
August.
didn't have, oh, yeah, maybe not,
Sorry.
sorry.
I wait for the fall.
Okay, so moving right along. The next is the HUD information fair market rents with a potential motion to accept the fair market rents for 2025 with a 10% increase to the HUD determined fair market rent for Windham County, Vermont. So any questions or comments from the board about that before we move to motion?
So these are the fair market rents, just a reminder, these are the fair market rents for the Section 8 program. So this is not for our rents, these are for the rents that are in the community. So our rent standards are different than these, we can't, we have a different rent amount, so these were for rents in the community. And I wanted to add on the bottom, like just to give you a little bit of information, this is not, you're not voting on this, so we're voting on the proposed line in the center. So, so to give you a little information, this is what, the first line is like what we currently pay, which we'll pay for Section 8 vouchers in the community. Underneath it is what the HUD standard is. Now, if you remember last year, we went above 10% last year. So like so what we're paying is actually higher than what the 2025 HUD standards even are this year. So for 2024, we're paying higher than what the HUD standards are for 2025. Proposing for HUD, for the new standards, you'll see that we're going up 10% of what the HUD standards are. So it won't be 10% of like what we paid last year, it'll be 10% of like what the current HUD standards are. And that's on the third line. And just to show you on the bottom, I wanted to give you this information because I thought it was helpful, was like the average gross rent for a 0-bedroom, the highest gross rent, this is just for Windham County, it's $1,307. That's a lot for, I mean, like when you think about a 0-bedroom, for a 1-bedroom, $1,408 is the high gross rent. And then it breaks down what the FMR would be, fair market rent would be, and then that HUD has that HUD allows, and then what 90% would be, because you could go down to 90% or you can go up 110%.
Now, this
And
is
the
a projection for 2025, you're projecting that amount, basically?
I'm sorry, which
for
one?
2025? I see 2024 BHA and then 2025 for next year. The amount, looks like it went down for 0, but it went down here for that. So I'm just trying to see how you projected.
So
It's the
it
third
is this. So the top here is the 2024 amount. This is what we pay currently, this top line.
Right.
Then the next line is, this is what HUD has said we can pay. So it didn't go down, it's just that we're paying over what HUD allowed last year.
Okay.
So what HUD is allowing this year is less than what we're currently paying. So we want to go up again another 10% because we want to get it even higher. Because we're finding that it's really hard. So this is for all of Windham County. Brattleboro actually has a higher, I think the rents, and I would argue that, I don't have the data, but I would argue that the rents are probably higher here than in some other places throughout the county.
17,
Yep.
And the benefit of the benefit of raising it is that it's more likely for a landlord to accept a Section 8 voucher if the amount is
If the payment standard is higher.
Yeah. Otherwise, they will say, actually, I'd rather rent to someone who didn't have a
Yeah.
voucher, and we want them
Yeah.
to use the vouchers.
Yeah, and it also will keep people housed. So landlords can, landlords could say, you know what, you're not giving me enough money. I can't afford to keep them. And so then they would lose their housing. We have a lot of really great landlords in town who have worked with us for many, many years. So, so I think we want to try to keep it so that they can get their bills covered, because I think, to be fair, property taxes have gone up considerably. Costs of living have gone up considerably, so it's not surprising that the rents have gone up too. So I think, yes, you're right, all of those things, keeping people housed, getting new people housed, and we have it within our budget to do it, so I think that was the proposal, yeah.
Okay. So are we ready to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the fair market rents for 2025 with a 10% increase to the HUD determined fair market rent for Windham County, Vermont.
I second.
Second, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And just so you're aware, the utility allowances haven't been issued yet from HUD, but when they are, they'll be added. We'll vote on that, and then we'll be added to that as well. What people are allowed to use as a deduction for utilities.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we're moving to the financial review and the July and August 2024 check listings. Any questions or comments? Okay, review the July 2024 financial comparable. Any questions or comments or anything notable that you'd like to point out? No.
I mean, I feel like I just got the one today actually for last month, so, you know, it always is a little bit late. So I've reviewed a more recent one today, and, you know, I have to say, that, you know, we're above what we projected for tenant rental income, which is great. We projected a little bit low intentionally. You know, so that's above what we had imagined us receiving, so that's good news. Our HAP subsidies are up a little bit, which is good. That means we're utilizing more of our subsidy. We've, you know, our Section 8 admin fee is up a little bit. That's also positive. You know, I think everything is in line, you know, so far. Not, you know, I think that we'll be seeing some legal costs that just haven't come through yet. But we really went high with estimates for legal. We estimated $50,000, which is really high for our RAD properties. And also we have other legal, you know, for our other properties we had also allocated. So, you know, I think we estimated really high intentionally. I think it's good that we aren't really high at this point. I think that's a good sign. Other than that, you know, I don't know what the effects will be. We've had a couple of big insurance, you know, so for the RAD properties, we had an incident at Moore Court where we had some big damage to the roof. So that work is just completed, yay. And so residents will be able to move back in and we'll be able to fill that unit. So that's really good news. But I haven't seen like all the final costs and then like how it will compare to what our deductible is for the property. We also had, when we had the situation at A.W. Richards, those were very substantial costs to have to clean a unit that has biohazardous material. So that, so we submitted that as a insurance. So I haven't seen that yet. So those will you'll probably see that either next month or the month afterwards. But overall, I think we've been, you know, our salaries, you know, are below what we projected. We do have an open position, but we also got funding for a new position. So, you know, I think overall they're most of the things are balancing them out. The things that I'm concerned about, you know, preparing for snow and things like that. We've had a pretty good year, you know, last year. You know, I hope that's. You know, I know everybody loves snow, but I hope that it's the Saints that we don't have a huge snow year. So those are the things that I'm sort of thinking about. But I think for costs around our administrative costs, we're in really good shape. And I think when we look at, you know, next month we'll be looking at projected health insurance increases. So I think that it's good that we're at a better place, that we're not going over, because this will give us a little more flexibility in thinking about how we want to go forward for next year.
Great. Okay, thank you. So check signing assignments, we have for September, Commissioner Wright currently, and then for October, we have Commissioner Walker, and you are fully ready?
Not ready,
yet.
but we have submitted the information
Okay.
to the bank, so I think we will be ready. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that we'll be ready.
And I can be his backup if
Okay,
needed.
thank you. Did we
Thank
want to think about November?
Yeah, is there a volunteer for November?
I'll do November Turkey Day.
Okay.
This is the cold days of my.
Okay. So Commissioner Stroud for November.
I'll do December to complete the year.
Okay, great.
Close it out.
Thank you. That's helpful. That's
December.
helpful in
Great.
planning, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so projects in progress for Melrose Terrace redevelopment. You mentioned it.
Sure.
Would you like to?
Yeah, so right now, we have a historic preservationist that came in to look at the property, and they have submitted a report to, for historic relevance of the property, which would allow us to apply for historic tax credits. So we've gotten that complete. We also have we have procured a civil engineer, so they have been, they were on the property today, so they're beginning to look at the property. We have also met with the M&S Development Company to figure out next steps. We're still holding off with office space until we have a better understanding of how close we would be to potentially beginning this project. But we have, M&S has been working to secure all of the outside procurement that we need for the property in order to make sure that we qualify for the different pieces. We're also looking at a geothermal system, and so bringing someone in to assess that as well.
Great. Thank you.
So moving along.
All right. Awesome. And thank you, Michelle, for participating on that
Welcome.
committee,
You're
on that work. Thank you. So Brattleboro Housing Opportunities, Inc., we received the updated statement. Any questions or comments?
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 people who have agreed to be on the BHOI board. So really good news. And so they are just organizing a meeting where they can all meet for the first time to decide on next steps, how often they want to meet, and what that would look like. And so I know that there's a doodle poll going out to those 4 people. And
Right.
so I think we'll have some really nice representation on that board. And I know that we're excited to get it going. So it's come a long way.
Great. So when they have their meetings, will we receive their minutes?
Yeah, yep, you will. Yeah, yeah.
Thank
I
you.
can- Yep.
Okay, so before we move into executive session, would we like to take any additional comments from participation?
I just want to ask, one thing that I wanted to ask before, but I think probably once I get to meet with the police department, because I see so much from my 6th floor balcony, but I never know what, if I'm not in direct danger, I hesitate to call in. But I think that session, when I get to speak with police people, that will probably help that.
Okay.
Not like you all have that answer. The other thing is, can you just briefly tell me in 1 or 2 sentences what the Brattleboro Housing Opportunities Inc. is?
Yeah, sure.
So because Brattleboro Housing Authority, or the partnership, we're a quasi-municipal organization, so we're part governmental. We're not allowed to raise money for residents, like we're not allowed to fundraise, we're not a nonprofit.
Yep.
So years ago, we created a board that was called Brattleboro Housing Opportunities, Inc., that was created, and we applied to become a nonprofit entity of this small board that just raises money specifically for resident services. And so a couple of things that it's raised money for, so we had a big fundraising project specifically to have a playground developed at Ledgewood Heights. It cost, I think, $140,000. We built a pavilion, so we raised money through this nonprofit board. Other things, David might be able to talk to you about, David Wright, who works here. They have money specifically for food programs to do, I think it's cooking programs and food programs. So it's a grant that we received specifically for that.
Because of their work in investigating what is out there?
Yeah.
For opportunities for residents.
Yeah, so what happens is usually it's two things. So it could be that a staff member brings an idea to the BHOI board and says, you know, we really need money for a dental program, right? We're finding that a lot of people need dental work and they can't afford it, and so they will then the BHOI board will say, okay, we'll think about it, and then they'll say to the BHA board, is this something we should pursue? And then they'll go forward and they'll try to find grant funding specifically for that. Or it could come from residents. Residents might say, you know, we really want, I don't know, something, you know, we want to have something outside, or, you know, whatever. And then, so we'll be able to raise money directly that way. Yeah.
Yeah, that helps a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions from resident participation before we go into executive session? Okay. So I would like to make a motion to enter into executive session.
A motion that we enter into executive session.
Second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Okay, so
And then a motion to end
I
the
would
meeting.
like to make a motion that we adjourn today's meeting.
Motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All in second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.